Hey everybody, my name's Aaron. I'd like to welcome you to my channel, Positive by Negative, where we're turning pain into power and power into purpose and alchemizing that dark spiritual coal into shiny bright diamonds that we can use for our growth and development in this big crazy world of ours. And if you're new to my channel, welcome. It's great to see you. I hope you hear something that resonates. If you do, give me a subscribe, give me a like. I'd really appreciate it. And if not, no worries. We can always be friends in some other facet of life. And if you're returning, awesome. It's great to see you back. And if you've not yet subscribed, please do. We're trying to get as many subscriptions as we can so we can, kind of continue to spread this message to as many people need it and, as many people as we can help. So, it does me a really big solid when you subscribe and give me likes and give me comments. And, I'd love to hear where you're tuning in from. And, if you hear something in here that resonates with you, I'd love to hear about it. Let's start a dialogue here. So today I've got good news for you. And that is, you don't have to have everything figured out in life. As a matter of fact, you don't have to have anything figured out, really, not intellectually at least. When we come here and when we incarnate on Earth, we come here in service to our soul. We are spiritual beings having a human experience, and it turns out we're actually a lot more spiritual than we are human. And so really, when we come here, it's for the growth of our soul. It's not so much for the growth of our human. This is just kind of a temporary vessel. This is sort of the equipment that we need to navigate this dense energy, but it's not, the ultimate goal is not to, kind of elevate the human. It's actually to elevate the soul, and, the human is a tool in doing that. And so when we come here, we, as a soul, we decide what lessons we want to learn. We decide what experiences we want to have. And we confer with our spirit guides and our angels and other souls that we'll meet along the way down here and kind of come up with a plan and kind of come up with a general direction we want to go. And then we're incarnated here and we forget all of it. We don't remember any of it. And it's kind of our job to, live our lives and get to where we do remember, why we came here and stuff. But, it takes a long time. But the important thing to remember is that it's ultimately in service of the soul. And so, people say, well, I wouldn't choose these horrible experiences. I wouldn't choose for tragedy. I wouldn't choose, for bad things to happen to me. And the truth of the matter is you kind of did. Where we come from and we're with Source, everything is literally just puppies and rainbows all the time. I mean, everything is always all good. And that's great, but it doesn't offer much opportunity for growth. I mean, think about it. Like in life, the things that you learn the most from are generally the things that are the least comfortable. When we do something correctly, we don't usually learn much from the lesson, but when we really screw it up, that's when we learn. That's when the lesson sticks. And so it is with soul development. If everything was just pleasant, we just floated along and everybody, just sang Kumbaya all day, not much would actually get done. And so it's in having these sort of negative experiences, I guess you would say, that we do grow, and we all come here, in service of our soul to grow, and we all actually have a mission as well, that we incarnate into here, have a specific task or a specific, thing we're supposed to do in life, and really that mission could be huge. It could be like world changing, or it could be, maybe you smile at somebody, a specific person one day, and that changes everything for them, and just that one smile reaffirms their their faith in humanity and something, and they change something about their life and blah blah blah, and off it goes. And so you never really know what your mission is, but you can always know that you're here to grow. And the good news is that we have a lot of help. Like I said, we have a spirit team. We have angels, guides, ancestors, and other spirits that or and entities that come here to help us. And we get a lot of communication from them, and we get that in the form of guidance. We get some guidance, and sometimes we get it in the form of intervention. And so, the guidance and interventions can be to encourage us to keep doing a certain thing or keep traveling a certain path. They can be to discourage us from doing something or like to, kind of redirect us off a path. Or if we're in like imminent danger or something like that, it can be to actually intervene and completely stop something from happening. And I have a few examples of those in my life that I've seen. Let's see, the encouragement one. I've had a few instances of that. I was unemployed at one time and was having a really hard time looking for a job, and I was living in another city, and my aunt, who lives in this city, called me up one day, and she's like, I just had the weirdest thing. She's like, I was reading through the classified ads in the newspaper, and I saw a job opening for this place that doesn't hire very much here, and they pay really well, they take really good care of their employees and stuff like that, and something inside me told me, yeah, that's Aaron's job, like that I'm supposed to reach out to you. So I was like, okay. And I kind of took it with a grain of salt. I was like, whatever, and lo and behold, about 6 months later, I put in an application and really like didn't think anything of it. And it was literally like 6 months later, they called me and said, hey, we're interested in interviewing you. Would you like to come out? And by this time I had actually moved to this city and stuff and was in a position where I could do that. And so I went and interviewed with them and ended up getting the job. And I was there for 11 years and it was a great learning experience. And it was, a great job for me to kind of grow up in, especially right after I'd gotten sober. It was a lot of structure and stuff. It was exactly what I needed. But that I wouldn't have known that had it not been for some sort of inspiration to my aunt to give me a call and tell me about it. So clearly somebody was looking out for me there, because there is no freaking way I would have come out with that on my own. I mean, it just wouldn't happen. But it turned out to be one of the greatest experiences of my life. There's the ones to discourage you from doing things. It was the day after Valentine's Day in 2015. My girlfriend at the time and I, who is now my wife, we had gone for Valentine's Day to a place in the mountains, and the road to the place we had gone to is really windy and narrow. And so the day after Valentine's Day, we were actually leaving to come back, and we were driving down that windy, narrow road, and all of a sudden she was like, pull over, I want to go take a picture of this thing that was off the side of the road. I was like, okay, whatever, and I pulled over, and literally the instant we got off the road, there came this Subaru WRX flying around this blind curve in the wrong lane. And, I don't know if this guy was suicidal or just had more testosterone than brains or what, but had we not gotten off the road at that exact moment, it would have been a head-on collision and it would have been an absolute disaster. So clearly somebody was watching out there, we were so shaken at that the picture never got taken. I mean, we were both just like, whoa, like, we narrowly avoided disaster in that moment. And it was crazy. So, there's things to, encourage and discourage us. And then there's intervention. And a good example of that in my life is one that's, kind of sucks to talk about, but I had a relapse from 2018 to 2022. And this happened right at the end of that relapse. And so by the time, into 2021 came around, I was pretty embroiled in this relapse that, it was started by a well-meaning doctor who thought I had ADHD and wrote me a prescription for amphetamines, in spite of the fact that I was an admitted, amphetamine addict, but I had been sober for like 10 years at that point. And so she thought it would be okay. And so she writes me a prescription for amphetamines, and lo and behold, I went to the races with it. And, as addicts tend to do when we're, presented with the drug of our choice. And, it was a long, kind of downhill spiral for a while. And so get to the end of 2021, and by that time I was like pretty whacked out of my mind. They don't call it dope for nothing. I was making some pretty bad decisions. And at some point I was making very bad decisions. And in December 2021, I ended up getting this very spontaneous and like severe septic infection in my knee, which required, it like instantly, put me down. I couldn't walk on my knee. Like, my life was in danger. I ended up having to have 2 emergency surgeries. And, it was really traumatic and stuff. But what it was is, I was making really bad decisions that probably would have eventually killed me. And I swear it was the universe or spirit or my guides or somebody saying, you need to sit your ass down and stop. And that's exactly what it did. It literally made it to where I couldn't hardly, I was basically couch bound for like 4 months and stuff while we were going through the surgeries. And it gave me the time to like really kind of sober up and like see what I was doing and like, kind of get my life back together. And so, at the time it was miserable and it was a horrible experience and stuff, but I'm so grateful that it happened. I look at that scar in my knee every day. Actually, the scar is because I've got a big long scar and then 4 smaller scars from those surgeries. And, I look at those as a reminder that, hey, we're being watched after here. And the way I kind of look at it is that, we have this general direction we're supposed to go in life, and it's sort of like a bowling lane. Like, it's got the gutters, but for kids, they put up bumpers, so the ball can't ever really go in the gutter. And that's kind of how it is with us. Like, we travel in this kind of general direction, And then, if we start to go too far off course, it gets painful or uncomfortable. And so we kind of get bumped back to the middle, and then we go too far this way and it happens again. And so, we have a certain amount of free will in there, but it's always, basically in service of getting to that place where we're, expanding our soul. And so, it's very comforting to me, and I hope it's comforting to you to know that, like, we're always being watched over. We're never alone. We've always got assistance in this existence. And sometimes it's kind of frustrating, to be honest with you. Back in like 2013, I was on a dating app, and I was on there forever and like never really like made any connections with anybody. And finally, like toward the very end of my using that dating app, I actually made a connection with somebody, and like, she was really cool, really nice. We had a lot in common. We had a lot of great conversations over the phone and by text. And so we were going to meet for lunch one day, and it was on a Sunday. And I had gone to a Buddhist temple that morning to go meditate. And so she had texted me while I was at the temple. And I was like, oh, sorry, I'm sorry, I'm just now getting back to you. I went to the temple to go meditate. And she was like, what? You're a Buddhist? I'm like, well, not really. I just meditate. And she's like, well, I can't even think about being with somebody who's Buddhist because they're atheists and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, but I'm not, and like, anyway, long story short, she ended up, canceling our date. She didn't want to go to lunch anymore. And so, it was Sunday, and I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do? Because I didn't have any plans for the day. So I was like, well, I'll go to the gym, which I never usually went to the gym on Sundays. And, I'm kind of bummed out that, I got stood up basically for my date and stuff like that. And I get to the gym, and I go to the cardio section, and there was my favorite elliptical machine that was right under a downdraft. I loved it because it had like a really cool air that blew on you when you went on it. And I look, and there's some lady on my favorite elliptical machine. And I was like, really? And so I went, and there's nobody else in the row of ellipticals. And I went and got on the one right next to her. And she gave me a look that could have curdled milk. I swear to God, like it was a chilling look. And I still tease her about it to this day. But somehow we got to talking and ended up, we ended up getting married and having a kid. And, it was all because I had been on that dating app, like, actually connected with somebody and then got stood up by him. But so I always joke that I met my wife because of a dating app instead of on one. And, and so it was really frustrating in the moment to like get stood up and stuff like that, but it all led to something better, and so the point is that, life may not always move in a smooth, in fact, it rarely moves in a smooth linear fashion that we like and stuff. And it may seem like, some things that happen are unnecessarily cruel or unnecessarily just like mean or something like that, but always it's, in service of getting us to that level of soul growth and expansion. And, and so when we know it that way, like, we can really like kind of settle in and be like, there's really nothing to worry about. This is all being guided. And we don't always get such direct, interventions and communications and stuff. Most of the time, our interaction with our spirit team and angels is through synchronicities, angel numbers, song lyrics, billboards and signs. Like, I've been seeing 10-10 and 11-11 all the time lately. I've been seeing a lot of strings of 3s and 8s and 5s. And those all say something. You can actually look them up. If you see, 3 5s, you can be like, Google angel number 555, and they'll tell you what it is. And, the meaning of it. And I found that it's almost uncannily accurate and stuff. And so, if you can kind of tune yourself in and really start to be open to those communications, you realize that you get a lot of guidance in this existence. And, you're never really alone, and, you're never completely adrift or rudderless, even though sometimes it feels like it. And sometimes, it's just time for us to pause and kind of, wait for the next, potential or timeline to come along. And those liminal phases are pretty frustrating, but even then we're still getting, angel numbers, or you may hear something in a song, like a, particular line, or you may overhear a conversation that kind of answers a question or an issue that you were thinking about. So, we're never without guidance. We're never without our team. We're always in communication, and it's always in service of something good, ultimately, even if it feels, uncomfortable in the moment, or just doesn't seem like we're going where we want to. Oftentimes Spirit has a much better plan and idea for us than we do. And, if we just, it's going to happen whether, we're resistant to it or not. So we may as well just kind of relax, let go, and go with the flow, and know that all this is is very guided, it's very intentional, and it's all for our own growth and development. So anyway, I could talk about this, ad infinitum. I find this particular subject very, very fascinating because I've seen so many instances of it in my own life, and I'm sure you have too. I'm sure there's things that you can think of that in retrospect you're like, yeah, that was like universe or source or angels redirect me, whatever it is. And I'd love to hear about it. If you want to pop it in the comments there, I would really love to hear about your experience with divine intervention or guidance or synchronicity, angel numbers, anything like that. So anyway, I'm going to leave it there. And, I just thank you all so much for joining me. If you made it this far, I appreciate it. Like I said, drop me a subscribe, drop me a like, and, I will see you next time. Thanks.